it's bad at 35, 40%, 50%, but you drop down below that, it's probably costing you money to put this work in place. It's up to you to understand how to communicate, sell, and pitch the value behind those services and create that value proposition for your clients. If you don't, you will be operating at an enterprise level at economy of scale returns, and that's not sustainable for a small business. We just aren't putting enough work in place to do that. Welcome back to Midweek Modern Craftsman. You guys and girls better lock in today because I don't have that much time and I have a lot to tell you. So I'm going to try and distill this to the least amount of words possible while creating the highest impact. We're going to start with the intro. I am going to provide you with the secret to how to make money managing subs as a small contractor. You heard it. You heard it here first. So for the first decade of my business, I would manage subs, right? Smaller bathrooms, kitchens, or smaller projects, kitchens, bathrooms. And I was relying on a small markup on my subcontractors' numbers to create profit for my business or to cover the costs of hiring those subcontractors. So it started just word of mouth, speaking to other contractors, people that I worked for, right? 20%, charge 20% on top of what the number is. I struggled to make money doing that, so I slowly raised it up, went as high as 40%. Still was just spending way more time than I was getting paid for. So it really, it seemed to no avail that it wasn't working. So it wasn't covering my time. It didn't cover my site visits, my layout coordination, miscommunication, callbacks, the hands-on management that was required. So I was creating a ton of value for not only my clients, but my subs, and really none for myself. So today what I do, and this is the secret, is I treat my management, my subcontractor management, as its own line item. So just like a larger GC would, I include a standalone management fee in my budgets, and I track my time against that, right? So there's a certain amount of time that I'm budgeting at an hourly rate, and that's to manage whatever trades I'm subcontracting work to, and that all depends on what trade it is, right? For example, for drywall, I'll use a drywall sub because they can do the work for less money than I can. And then I'll budget a certain amount of time that I'll go in and fine tune that work. And that'll be within my management fee for those trades because it's time associated with those trades. That's how I break it up for a plumber, right? I'm not going in and fine tuning their plumbing work. So that is covering the time meeting with them, going over layout, setting, blocking. I cover all of that within this management fee. It's not necessarily me going in and meeting with them, introducing them to the client, having a quick conversation. Like there's hands-on work associated with managing a job site. Super might do it, or I would do for free. What would happen in the past is I would hire a plumber, say it was a kitchen, and I would charge the markup on them, as high as 40%. And then I would have to meet with them at the beginning of the job to make sure that we had everything that was necessary for them to start their work, for them to measure out pipes, everything that they need to make sure that my ideas in my head are going to, and what's on paper are going to work with what they actually have to do in the field. And then when they come to do the work, right, I'm scheduling them. There's time associated with that. There's paperwork. They're invoicing me. I'm going back and forth with email with them, sending them specs. I'm invoicing the clients. I'm, cutting checks, all of this, which I do myself, but I have to view this from the standpoint of what if I were a bigger company, and I was paying somebody in the office to do this. I was paying a super to do this. Why am I doing this all for free? So I realized again that I needed a separate fee. This management had to be a separate service. A lot of times when I had employees, I would be on one job and I wouldn't send them to go manage this sub because I think deep down I knew that my markup wasn't covering that. So I would keep them on the job. I'd lose some efficiency there, or gain a little bit of rework because of mistakes or me not delegating properly, them not fully understanding what we were doing. And then I would leave and I would go do this management for free. So I was kind of getting hit both ways. And it wasn't really until I started getting involved with bigger contractors and seeing how they price things and what their markups were and how they build and invoiced that I understood how to work this into my my own business. So again, that management fee is a separate service, and I still apply a markup to my subcontractor costs, but that serves a different purpose. That's access to my vetted subpool. That's basic coordination and communication, the liability and risk I assume by hiring and managing them, the administrative costs like insurance, accounting, compliance. It does not cover the actual project management that makes these projects successful. That's where this separate management fee comes in. So why is this really important for owner operators and small contractors? Because we are not managing projects with subcontracts that are $200,000, right? That these bigger builds, you could have a plumbing contract that's a couple $100,000, and a 12 to 20% markup on that will cover some of the costs associated with that. But still, those bigger builders will have these smaller markups. And then they also have their management fee. The way that they typically do it is they're not charging their plus on top of their self-performed work. Everyone's a little bit different, but they have a management fee regardless. They have a management fee that's separate than that plus and that markup that they're charging, which is typically lower than our markup because we're not operating at an economy of scale. So if you have a $1,500 electric subcontract and you're charging 15% on that, it's pennies, right? So even at 35%, 40%, 50%, it's still pennies, but it's better than that 12 to 20% that these bigger guys and girls are operating at. So you have to understand why those numbers are bigger, and typically it's because they just have the numbers are bigger, right? The contracts are bigger, the economies of scale. There's still a small project, a bathroom. It's still the amount of time to manage may not be as much, but it's still all the same trades. It's still all the inspections, still all the materials. So the economies of scale go down as you manage bigger projects, and there's more overlap in costs, so you don't necessarily need to capture those costs with a higher markup. So I'm going to go through two quick examples of what this looks like and how I charge differently and what the numbers wind up being. Okay, so if this is moving pretty fast and you want to check this out, I have a blog post that accompanies this. I know I've told you all that a million times, but go on moderncraftsman.co. There's a blog tab, and you can see these examples on paper, which probably would be a little bit easier to understand the numbers. I made it very simple, but it'll just be easier for you to see and understand. So check out moderncraftsman.co and hit the blog drop down. So example one is markup only, how I used to operate. So I bring in a plumber for a bathroom, and he charges me $3,500 to perform the work. And I put a 35% markup on that, which is $1,225. So my total of what I'm billing to the client in my budget that I'm providing them is $4,725. And they understand that is the cost of the plumbing work plus the markup associated with that. So seems like a big number for a bathroom at first glance. You think that there's a decent margin in there, right? It's only $3,500 worth of work, and I'm making $1,200 on that, but you have to account for your time. So on that project, it could be 2 hours meeting with the plumber, right? The job's getting started, you're not the job, or even right before the work's about to commence, you got to get in your truck, you got to drive over, meet the plumber, introduce them to the client, go over the job, measure things with them. You spend 2 hours. Work started. It's the day before the plumber's supposed to come rough in the job. You spend 3 hours laying everything out, ensuring everything works with door swings, with casing, everything's centered, the plumbing fixtures all work out, the blocking's installed so that the setbacks are correct based on your finished thickness of tile and board and whatever you're using. Another 3 hours there. When the work begins, you're driving out to the job, you're meeting with the plumber, you're explaining to him about all of your plumbing and your layout and what's critical and what things need to be and concerns that he or she may have. Then for some reason you fail an inspection. You got to go back, meet with the plumber again. Why do we fail the inspection? How can we fix this? Schedule another inspection. And then job's wrapping up. You got prep coming. So you got to drive out to the job, get the fixtures, secure the fixtures, open the fixtures, make sure that everything's there, no missing parts, nothing's damaged, everything works. Got a couple hours there. Then after he's done, you got an hour worth of cleanup, polishing fixtures, making sure that the silicone's done correctly, there's no leaks, everything's buttoned up underneath, nothing's sloppy, all the glues are joint, all that stuff, right? So 11 hours that you've spent, 10 hours, whatever it is, conservatively. And that's assuming that there's no issues, nothing goes sideways. So say you value your time or a super's time, $100 an hour, that's $1,100 in labor alone, $1,000 in labor alone. So that $1,225 markup, you covered the cost of labor, didn't really profit on that labor, and it leaves you either $125 or $225 to cover your insurance, the admin, wear and tear on your vehicle, driving back and forth, risk, overhead. No profit, no margins, really just surviving. So you can see how those numbers don't work out. You move more towards 15, 20% markup. Now they're really not making any sense. So it's bad at 35, 40%, 50%, but you drop down below that, it's probably costing you money to put this work in place. So example 2, you have your markup and a management fee. So you have that same $3,500 contract, 35% markup, which is $1,225. Now say that you're going to put 8 hours worth of management on this job. So maybe the last time when there was no management on it, you didn't really understand what the management took. So you have 11 hours and it's based on some inefficiencies and some overlap. And you just didn't put yourself in a corner of saying, we have 8 hours of management on this job for the plumber. We need to get this done. So now that we put that number in, we can back up against that. We can realize when we're spending too much. If we're spending too much, why is it? Is it because the plumber? Is it because the client? Is it because an existing condition? Are we able to capture some sort of a change order because something isn't according to what we assumed in the spec that we wrote? Did they change a fixture out last minute? Did they add another fixture, a different type of valve? All of that, now we're backing ourselves into that number. So we're saying we have 8 hours. So that's going to tell us that we're not going to spend 9 hours, right? We're going to make sure that we don't spend more than 8 hours because that's all that's budgeted for. And if we do, we can now capture money potentially by determining why we went over that. And if that's something that we should, that should be coming at a cost to us, at a cost to the client, or a cost to the plumber. So right now, the total build for this project to the client is $5,725. So you have not only the $1,225 to cover the overhead, the access to your sub pool, some inefficiencies, some burden, that general markup, but now you have $1,000 allocated to managing this project. So you're going to ensure and create whatever systems or processes you know that you need to manage this subcontractor to hit that $1,000 mark, which is going to cover the time and whatever profit you have that's based on, that $125 an hour figure that I gave you. The way that I operate mine are all loaded numbers. So if it's $125, that includes all my overhead and burdens associated with the cost of that employee. I don't have a plus on top of that. So that would all be accounted for in my rate. So this is the easy part, right? You understand the numbers. You're $1,000 more than when you didn't add this in. So, if you are applying that to multiple trades, this job could be $3,000. It could be $5,000 more. The bigger the job, the easier it is to, amortize these costs and justify these costs for clients. But we're small contractors. We don't have huge jobs. They're not huge numbers. So how are you justifying an extra $1,000, $2,000, $3,000 on a job that's only $20,000, $25,000? this is where the marketing comes in. This is where the sales comes in. This is where you understanding the value associated with that number and what your markup actually covers. This is what's going to guarantee that you make money managing subs as a small contractor. Again, if you're doing $200,000 subcontracts, that's one thing. A little bit easier to make money on them. There's some overlap in management. You're managing multiple trades at a time, so you're not specifically going out to one job to manage one sub trade. You can't overlap subs on a smaller project. So there's costs associated with these jobs that do not make them cheap to execute, but we want to execute them inexpensively to please our clients, and because we don't understand the numbers and the cost and the downtime and the inefficiencies and the burden associated with these projects. So when people are pricing this out and bidding this, you now have $3,000 on a $20,000 job where a client's going to say, well, yeah, this guy's $3,000 left, so why wouldn't I go with him? It's the same project, assuming the same specs, all that. So this is where this transparency, this budget, all these numbers explaining that you have the separate markup for management, or the separate labor line item for management, that you have the separate overhead and what that's covering. This is where it's up to you to sell these projects and to sell the value. And the easy part, we figured that out. It's knowing our numbers, right? And now the hard part is marketing and selling the value to the clients and the right clients. So here's what I do to explain it. Again, the 35% markup, it's going to cover access to my network. I have a really strong relationship with my subs. They're reliable subs. They're reputable subs. I understand how to manage them. I know the results that I'm going to get. They prioritize our work, our schedule. I understand their price point and the access to these subs, and the level of execution that I can reach with these subs is worth financial money. There's value there. That's part of the 35%. Administrative overhead, right? With the way that I bill and I'm invoicing, you can have an overhead like this plus on cost plus that's going to account for back office and administrative. I don't have a plus, so I need to make sure that wherever my numbers are coming from, if it's subcontractor based, that I'm charging an administrative markup based on that trade and that task. I don't have the type of business where I put a number, a more broad overhead markup, and slap that across all of my sales volume, because year to year my sales volume can be dramatically different based on how much work I do and the jobs I do. So I would rather understand what that overhead looks like and that markup according to each individual trade or managing them. So I know that my markup there is going to cover the administrative and the overhead associated with these job costs, rather than saying that's just the overhead of my entire business, because it might be different from year to year. So that's where I put these numbers, and that makes up my number, but it's attributed specifically to this task, and it's not a broader overhead that I'm putting across my entire company, because I want to charge for each job specifically. Even though it's an admin cost, it is for this job. I wouldn't be paying the invoicing, the emails, the correspondence, the cutting of checks if I weren't doing this job. It's just back end overhead. It also accounts for the risk, right? I manage the subcontractor. I stand behind their work. If something goes wrong, if there's a hiccup, if something's damaged, I own it. That liability has to be reflected in my pricing. So then we have the separate management fee. What does that cover? That covers site meetings, problem solving, communication, correspondence, quality control. That communication and that coordination is not just up front. It's not just simply during the job. It's also after the job as well. I am ensuring that the subcontractor executes the design and the scope as promised, and that nothing is compromised. I'm protecting the vision, the schedule, and the standard for the quality. So all the time it takes to meet with these subs, to do material takeoffs with these subs, to go over layout, to problem solve when there's a hiccup, when there's a layout issue, when something doesn't work with the existing conditions or the floor joist or the walls, or if we need to move framing or adjust framing, that's part of my management fee. I could try and place that in right? Part of this goes into layout, part of this goes into carpentry. No, that for me, that's all within my management fee. It's the easiest way for me to wrap my head around it when I'm budgeting, line item budget. How much management, how much extra work do I have with my tool belt on, communicating and executing this work with my subcontractors? So that's what that management fee covers. Clients, right? You can manage your own project. I'll step out, plumber will come in. Just to be fully transparent, I don't actually allow this, but I guarantee that client and the sub do not fully understand the design, the schedule, or the technical requirements to the extent that I do. So you will not get the results that we anticipated and that I was contractually hired to execute if you go that route. So you have to determine, is it worth that $1,000 or not? To me, it's a no-brainer. At the end of the day, if it's $3,000 onto the job, I can guarantee and stand behind what's going to happen. Yeah, that's what you should pay. If clients push back on this, that's a reasonable fear that you might have. It's probably one of two things. You're not clearly communicating the value behind the cost like I just did with your markup or the cost of the management. You're probably not communicating the value there. Clients don't understand. They just think it's an added cost. You're hiding numbers. That's why I like to be transparent and I like to educate my clients on those costs. And two, you're probably pitching to the wrong client. You're not attracting the right client. Your marketing is not correct. It's not substantial. You are not pitching, selling, marketing, and creating a sales funnel that's driving the right clients your way, or you're letting them get too deep into that funnel before you realize that. So once you understand the value that you can provide, you can build this confidence in your processes. You're able to clearly and articulately communicate that to your clients, and that becomes second nature to you. Your projects will become profitable even as a small scale contractors. And you have to remember, big companies manage this work this way. They have for years. They just do it at scale. Their markups are smaller, right? 12 to 20%, but they apply to larger contracts and larger sums of money. So for this smaller, high touch work, your markups and your rates must be higher in order to maintain margins. You're not doing multiple millions of dollars of work in a year. You're not managing multiple millions of dollars of work. So if you're relying on 12, 20% to cover the cost of this, you're not charging a separate management fee. You will not be making money. I'm telling you firsthand from experience, you won't be making money. Everything that I tell you on this podcast is going to make you more expensive. Your number's going to come up. And I've heard for years, oh, just raise your rates. You're not charging enough. You have to understand why. Right? I'm not telling you just to charge more money. I'm telling you what you need to account for. And everything that I'm telling you is going to drive your number up. You can't just do that and anticipate and expect that clients are going to pay it. You have to understand why the number went up. You have to be fully transparent and you have to be able to market, sell, communicate the value behind that and be fully transparent to gain the trust of these clients as to why that number's more and why they will be willing to pay you more than the next guy or girl because of A, B, and C. So everything that I tell you, yeah, your rate's going to go up, your number's going to go up. It's up to you to understand how to communicate, sell, and pitch the value behind those services and create that value proposition for your clients. If you don't, you will be operating at an enterprise level at economy of scale returns, and that's not sustainable for a small business. We just aren't putting enough work in place to do that. So you have to remember, account for the cost of the work, charge the appropriate markups, and sell a separate management fee. If you want to be profitable, if you want to be successful as a small contractor, as an owner operator managing subs, these are the things that you must do. That's it for today. Told you it was going to be a quick one. Hop on the website, moderncraftsman.co. Nick and I are going to be putting out a bunch of monthly workshops. The next one will be on pre-construction, I believe. So sign up for the newsletter to be the first one to hear about that. They're all free, but you're going to have to register. the registration link. All the information will be coming through the newsletter, moderncraftsman.co. If you want to hop on a consulting call, if you want to talk about this stuff or any of your other numbers, Tyler at trghomeconcepts.com. Thanks, everyone, for hanging around. I'll catch you next week.